My name is Silas Vance, and 3 weeks after I finally bought the one thing I had worked nearly a decade for, my dream truck, I was served court papers. When I opened the envelope and saw the names on the first page, I thought it was a joke. But it wasn't. The plaintiffs suing me were my own parents, Robert and Deborah Vance. They wanted a judge to force me to hand over my truck to my little brother. I had spent $78,400 of my own hard-earned money on that truck, money saved through 8 years of 80-hour workweeks in the oil fields. And now, the people who raised me were dragging me into court like I was a stranger who owed them something. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing with your loved ones. The day I bought the truck is burned into my memory. I was still in my work boots, still covered in dust and oil, when I walked into the dealership. I had never bought anything new before. Most of my life had been hand-me-downs, patched-up clothes, and cheap used cars I kept running with zip ties and hope. But this time I paid in cash. A 2021 Ford F-150 Lariat, fully loaded, the kind of truck I used to stare at while fueling up old rigs. When I sat behind the wheel for the first time, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't about luxury. It was about surviving long enough to finally give myself something good. It was the first thing I ever owned that didn't come with someone else's name in the history. My mistake was driving it straight to my parents' house. I wanted to share the moment, maybe even show them that all the hard work had finally paid off. But the look on their faces told me I shouldn't have come. My dad's smile was tight, almost forced. My mom didn't say anything at first. She just walked around the truck like she was inspecting it for flaws. And then Preston came outside. Preston, the golden child, the one who never worked a full week in his life because mom and dad always bailed him out. He slid his sunglasses down his nose, stared at the truck like it was already his, and said, "Dad always told me the first big score was for me. You know that, right?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. But he didn't laugh back. My parents didn't either. There was this strange silence, like they were all waiting for me to hand him the keys. The rest of the visit felt off. Every compliment about the truck sounded like a hint. Every question felt like a test. And when I left, that cold little knot of dread sat heavy in my stomach, though I didn't yet know why. 3 weeks later, I found out. They weren't hinting. They weren't joking. They had been planning. And they were willing to drag me into court to take the one thing I had earned without them. That was the moment everything changed. When the court papers arrived, I sat alone in my work trailer and opened them slowly, hoping there was some kind of mistake. But as I read each page, the truth became clear. My parents hadn't just sued me. They had written an entire story to make it seem like I owed my brother everything he wanted. The complaint described an oral agreement I apparently made years ago, one I had never heard of. According to them, I had promised to support Preston for life and give him anything he needed to get ahead. They claimed my own progress came from their help, as if the long nights, the dangerous shifts, and the years away from home meant nothing. In their version of my life, I was standing on their shoulders, not my own work. The more I read, the stranger it became. The documents stated that my father's guidance was the reason I had a job at all, and that he had shaped me into a responsible adult. It said Preston was struggling emotionally, and that the truck would help him recover. They called it a therapeutic tool, as if a brand new pickup was medicine. None of it made sense. I knew my brother well enough to understand he didn't want healing. He wanted status, attention, and the chance to show off. But on paper, he looked like someone who needed help, and I looked like the selfish older brother ignoring a family crisis. What hurt most wasn't the false claims. It was seeing my father's signature at the end of every page. He signed his name under every accusation, every lie, every attempt to paint me as ungrateful. He didn't hesitate. He didn't stop to think about what this would do to me. He just signed. My mother added a statement too, saying they had always supported me financially and emotionally, even though I had left home at 18 with nothing but a duffel bag and a small toolbox. Reading her words felt like someone rewriting my entire past. The complaint also described Preston as a young man who had endured hardship and needed stability. It mentioned nothing about his habits, the late-night calls asking for help, the gambling problems, or the way my parents always cleaned up after him. Instead, it said he was being denied access to family assets that supposedly belonged to him. The truck I bought with my own earnings was listed as one of those assets. They even estimated its value like they had contributed to it, like they had a right to decide where it should go. I sat there for a long time, staring at the pages spread across the table. It was strange how a stack of paper could make someone feel so small. My own family had built a case against me with words that didn't match reality. They turned moments that never happened into facts. They made promises I never spoke sound real. And they did all of it without ever talking to me first. That cold distance in the writing showed me exactly how far they were willing to go. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't misunderstanding. It was a choice. And once I saw that, something inside me hardened in a way it never had before. When I first met Valerie Chun, I was exhausted and angry, but she didn't waste a second on sympathy. She flipped through the complaint with quick, sharp movements, and when she finally looked up, her expression told me everything. She wasn't shocked or confused. She understood exactly what was happening. Her first words hit harder than anything my parents had done. She said quietly, "They didn't just file a case. They went after your entire identity. If you want to win, you need to stand as the man you became, not the boy they remember." Her calm confidence settled something in me. For the first time since the lawsuit arrived, I felt like I had someone on my side who wasn't trying to twist my story. Valerie didn't sugarcoat anything. She said the case wasn't just about a truck, it was about control. She called it financial and emotional pressure disguised as legal action. She explained that people who felt entitled to someone's hard work often tried to rewrite history to keep their power. My parents had done that by creating a story that made me look dependent on them. Valerie made it clear we had to break that story apart piece by piece. Then she laid out her plan. She wanted every document I could find from the last 10 years. Pay stubs from every job, bank statements showing deposits, schedules proving how much I worked, and even old messages from my parents. She said the truth had to be backed up with proof, not emotion. The court didn't care about feelings, it cared about facts. And facts were what would protect me. She also asked me a long list of questions, not to judge me but to understand the pattern. She wanted to know when I left home, how I paid for welding school, and whether my parents ever contributed to anything in my adult life. As I answered, she listened carefully, sometimes taking notes, sometimes asking me to repeat small details. She was building the real version of my life, something stronger than the story in the complaint. Valerie explained that we weren't just responding to their claims. We were going to dismantle them. She said my parents had created a picture where Preston needed help, and I was the one refusing it. To fight that, she needed to show the reality. That I supported myself, that I earned my own opportunities, and that my brother's problems weren't mine to fix. She also wanted to show the judge that my parents were trying to twist the system to get something they had no right to. After laying out the plan, she leaned back and said, "This will be tough, but it's winnable. You've lived the truth. Now we're going to prove it." Her confidence didn't feel forced. It felt earned, and it began to steady me. When I left her office that day, I wasn't confused or overwhelmed anymore. I knew what needed to be done. I gathered years of documents, dug through old files, and found every piece of proof showing I had built my life on my own hands. Valerie had turned a moment of fear into a mission. The fight had officially started, and this time, I wasn't facing it alone. The next stage of the case was something Valerie called discovery, and she told me it was where the truth usually slipped out. I didn't fully understand what she meant until I saw it happen. This part of the process required both sides to hand over documents, messages, financial records, anything connected to the claims. My parents had marched into court with high confidence, acting like everything they said was solid. But once discovery began, that confidence slowly cracked. Their lawyer demanded access to my work history, bank details, and anything that could link my success to them. They were clearly expecting to find proof that they had supported me in some way. When they received my files, all they saw were years of deposits from long shifts and seasonal work. Every dollar came from jobs I had taken far from home. There wasn't a single record of them contributing even once. Valerie said quietly, they were hoping for magic. Instead, they got reality. But the real shift happened when Valerie sent requests for their financial records. My parents didn't expect to be examined in return. They stalled, argued, and tried to limit what we could see, but the court forced them to comply. When their bank statements arrived, Valerie spent hours going through them. She finally called me in and pushed a folder toward me. Inside was the truth they had tried to hide. A few years back, they had taken out a $40,000 home equity loan. Not for home repairs. Not for emergencies. The money had gone straight to covering Preston's gambling losses. There were transfers to casinos, withdrawals late at night, and payments to lenders. Valerie explained that this showed a long history of enabling him. Instead of correcting his behavior, they had emptied their savings to clean up another mess. She told me this was important because it revealed a pattern. They had poured money into him, not me. That wasn't the only discovery. Valerie also obtained security footage from the dealership and a nearby camera at my apartment complex. One clip showed Preston walking around my truck late at night. Another showed him pulling at the door handle, checking if it was unlocked. The most painful one caught him dragging a key across the driver's side door before running off. He had done this before the lawsuit, trying to damage something he couldn't have. Valerie included all of it in our response. She said it proved intent, jealousy, and desperation. Their claims about family support looked weak when compared to loans taken to cover Preston's habits. Their complaints about my behavior looked empty next to footage of their younger son trying to vandalize my property. As discovery continued, their side grew quieter. The strong tone they used in their complaint faded. Their lawyer tried to soften their claims, adjust details, and reduce the demands, but it was too late. The documents showed the truth far better than any argument could. Valerie told me that cases like this fall apart once facts replace stories. By the end of discovery, I no longer felt cornered. I felt steady. Their narrative had holes everywhere, and Valerie found every single one. What they tried to build had started to crumble, and all I had done was stand still and let the truth speak. The depositions were scheduled on a gray morning that already felt heavy, but Valerie reminded me this part was important. It wasn't a trial, but it was the first time everyone involved would be questioned under oath. I sat across from my parents and Preston in a plain conference room. There was no judge, no audience, just lawyers, a recorder, and the truth waiting to come out. My mother went first. As soon as questions started, she leaned into emotional language. She spoke in a shaky voice and dabbed her eyes, but her face stayed strangely dry. Valerie stayed patient, letting her finish before asking simple questions. One of them was, if you believed Preston needed a vehicle so badly, why didn't you buy him one within your budget? The room became still. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, then looked toward my father for help. She had no explanation. Her story about their concern for Preston didn't match their choices. Valerie moved on, but the damage was done. My mother's act cracked quickly once facts replaced sympathy. My father took the seat next. He entered with loud confidence, acting as if he understood every angle of the law. Within minutes, he started quoting something he called family law tradition, saying parents had rights over a child's achievements. Valerie didn't argue. She just asked, "Can you provide any document showing you contributed financially to Silas's career or schooling?" He reached into a folder filled with random papers, old bills, unrelated notes, but nothing that supported his claims. When he realized he had nothing, the confidence faded. He shifted in his chair and lowered his voice, suddenly careful with his words. The strong figure he tried to portray earlier disappeared. Then came Preston. He walked in like someone arriving at a party, not a legal proceeding. He leaned back in his chair with a grin that never left his face. When Valerie asked about his work history, he quickly lied, saying he had been employed full-time for the last year. Valerie didn't react. She simply opened a printed stack of his social media posts. With the recorder running, she read out loud the captions he wrote while clubbing in Vegas, traveling with friends on weekdays, and bragging about living free. He tried to explain it away, but every excuse fell flat. His lies were exposed in seconds, and the smirk slowly disappeared. By the end of the depositions, their entire case looked shaky. Every attempt to twist the story collapsed under direct questions. My mother's dramatic performance didn't hold. My father's claims had no grounding, and Preston's dishonesty was caught on record. I didn't feel proud watching them struggle, but I did feel clarity. This wasn't about misunderstanding or confusion. They had tried to use the legal system to force their way into my life, and now they were being confronted with their own choices. When the day ended, Valerie gathered her notes and said quietly, "This helped us more than you know." For the first time, I believed her completely. The truth wasn't just on our side. It was becoming impossible for them to hide. The night before the trial, I was sitting in my apartment trying to calm my thoughts when I heard a knock. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, my Uncle Ray stood there holding a small, worn book. He looked uneasy, like he had been debating whether to come at all. Without saying much, he stepped inside and set the book on my table. "This belonged to your grandfather," he said. "I think you need to see it before tomorrow." I opened the ledger carefully. The pages were old, filled with neat handwriting. Each entry listed money my grandfather had put aside for his grandsons. My name and Preston's appeared side by side in clear lines. We were supposed to receive equal amounts when we reached adulthood. As I read, a strange heaviness settled in my chest. I remembered vague conversations from years ago about something Grandpa had left us, but nothing ever came of it. I never asked questions. I assumed there was nothing to ask. Uncle Ray pulled out a chair and sat down across from me. He explained that my parents had withdrawn Preston's share when he turned 18. They told the family he needed help starting a project. That project ended quickly, and the money he received vanished with it. Then Ray lowered his voice and told me the part my parents never intended for me to know. They had taken my share too, claiming they were keeping it safe until I was ready. But that money had also disappeared, used to cover another one of Preston's plans that failed almost immediately. I stared at the ledger for a long time. It was strange how numbers written decades ago could reveal truths that had been hidden so carefully. My parents had taken something that wasn't theirs and given it to the same person who was now dragging me into court. This was more than a disagreement or an argument about a truck. It was a pattern. Years of choosing one son over the other, of quietly taking from me to support someone who never carried his own weight. The betrayal didn't start with the lawsuit. It started long before I ever knew. Uncle Ray watched my reaction and then said softly, "Your grandfather wanted both of you to have a fair start. He trusted your parents to do the right thing. They didn't." He paused, then added, "I'm willing to speak about this tomorrow if you want me to. Someone needs to say it out loud." I felt something shift inside me. Until that moment, the case had been about false claims, twisted stories, and a truck they believed should belong to Preston. But the ledger showed something deeper. Proof that they had taken advantage of their position as parents and kept it hidden. Valerie had told me we needed strong evidence, something that cut through their excuses. This book did exactly that. I thanked Uncle Ray, unsure how to express how much his honesty meant. He left quietly, but the weight he brought with him stayed on the table. That night, as I read through the ledger again, I understood that the truth wasn't just on my side. It had finally stepped forward on its own. The morning of the trial arrived with a mix of nerves and acceptance. I put on the only suit I owned, the one I bought specifically for this day. It didn't look fancy, but it fit well enough. When I reached the courtroom, I saw my father standing tall with his veteran's pin placed neatly on his jacket, clearly hoping it would influence the judge. My brother sat beside him in expensive sneakers and a designer jacket, acting like this was some kind of show. The contrast between us felt sharp. They came dressed to create an image. I came dressed simply to tell the truth. When the session began, their lawyer stood confidently and tried to paint me as someone who had turned his back on his family. He described me as cold, ungrateful, and unwilling to help my brother. He said I had benefited from years of guidance and owed a debt I was refusing to pay. Listening to it felt unreal, like he was describing a stranger. The judge listened politely, taking notes here and there, but his expression didn't change much. Then it was our turn. Valerie stood, straightened her papers, and spoke in a calm voice that carried across the room. She didn't raise her tone or try to make things dramatic. She simply laid out the facts one step at a time. She began with my work history, presenting records that showed every deposit I made over the past several years. Each payment lined up with weeks spent far from home, working long hours in harsh conditions. There wasn't a single sign of anyone else contributing. Next, she brought up the security footage. When the video played, the room grew quiet. The screen showed Preston lingering near my truck late at night, checking the doors and scratching the side before hurrying away. My brother slouched lower in his seat when the judge turned his eyes toward him. It was hard to watch, but it also cleared away any doubt about his intentions. Valerie didn't stop there. She called Uncle Ray to the stand. He walked up slowly, carrying the old ledger. His voice was steady as he explained how my grandfather had left equal funds for both his grandsons. He told the court how my parents gave Preston his portion but kept mine, claiming it would be held until I was ready. Then he revealed that the money had been used to cover one of Preston's failed plans. The judge leaned forward in his chair as he heard this part. The room felt different after that, quieter, heavier. As Uncle Ray spoke, I watched the judge's face carefully. The mild interest he had shown earlier had changed. There was a firm, disapproving look settling in, like he was starting to understand the full picture. He asked a few direct questions, and Ray answered them clearly. By the time Valerie finished, Their entire case looked weak. Everything they tried to say about me collapsed under the evidence. My parents avoided looking in my direction. Preston kept his head down. Walking out of the courtroom that day, I felt lighter. Not because I had won yet, but because the truth had finally been spoken in a room where it mattered. When the judge returned to the courtroom with his decision, the silence felt heavy. I sat still, trying to steady my breathing. My parents looked tense, and Preston kept tapping his foot on the floor. The judge settled into his chair, adjusted his glasses, and began speaking in a slow, clear voice. At first, he simply recapped the main points of the case, but then his tone changed. It grew sharper, almost cold. He looked directly at my parents and said, "This case is a shameful abuse of the judicial system and a profound failure of parental judgment." The words hit the room like a sudden drop in temperature. My mother lowered her head. My father clenched his jaw. The judge continued, explaining that the evidence showed no connection between my hard work and anything they claimed to have provided. He said the lawsuit was built on assumptions, personal favoritism, and attempts to control an adult who had built his own life. Listening to him speak felt unreal, like someone was finally saying the things I couldn't bring myself to say out loud. He announced that the case was dismissed with prejudice. Valerie had explained earlier that this meant they could never bring the same claims against me again. There would be no second lawsuit, no more attempts to twist the story. It was over. But the judge didn't stop there. He ordered my parents to cover all the legal fees and court costs, which added up to a little over $22,000. Hearing the amount made Preston sit up straight, as if he couldn't believe what he heard. The judge wasn't finished. He pointed out several statements Preston made under oath that didn't match the evidence. He said the inconsistencies were serious enough to raise concerns about perjury. He announced that a copy of the case file would be passed to the district attorney's office to review those statements. The room went still again. Preston's face turned pale. My parents looked shocked, as if they hadn't considered that lying in a legal setting could have real consequences. Once the judge finished, he stood and left the courtroom, leaving everyone sitting in the strange quiet he created. Valerie leaned toward me and whispered, "This is as strong a win as it gets." I nodded, still processing everything. It didn't feel like celebration. It felt like breathing fresh air after being trapped underground. The pressure that had been building for weeks loosened all at once. As people began gathering their things, I remained seated for a moment, letting the reality settle in. The judge had seen through every lie and every attempt to twist the truth. He had recognized the difference between genuine struggle and manipulation. This wasn't just a legal victory. It was a moment that finally separated my life from their control. When I stood to leave, I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me worth returning to. The hallway felt colder than the courtroom. As soon as the door closed behind us, their real faces came out. My father stepped toward me with tight shoulders and anger burning in his eyes. He didn't shout at first. He just stared like he wanted me to feel small again. Then, in a low, shaking voice, he blamed me for everything. "You've killed your mother," he said, as if repeating it would make it true. My mother was crying, but there was something different in her tears this time. It wasn't grief. It was panic. She kept looking at my father like she wanted him to speak for her, like she needed him to tell her what to feel. Preston stood slightly behind them, jaw clenched, pretending he was still in control. He leaned in and whispered, "You'll regret this." But there was no strength in it. It sounded like someone who had already lost and didn't know what else to say. For the first time in my life, their words didn't hit me. Their anger didn't shake me. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel scared. I felt done. I looked at my mother first. Her face was red, her voice shaking, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to comfort her. I simply said the truth she had avoided all this time. "You chose this. You chose him over honesty." She froze like she had been slapped with reality instead of my words. I had spent so many years trying to understand her choices, trying to forgive them, trying to make sense of why she kept siding with the loudest man in the room. At that moment, I realized I didn't need answers anymore. Her choices were hers, and the consequences were hers too. Then I turned to Preston. He tried to look tough, but his hands were shaking. I told him exactly what he needed to hear, clearly and calmly. "The restraining order is ready. If you come near me or anything I own, it goes into effect immediately." His mouth twitched like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. All that arrogance he had in the courtroom had vanished in the hallway. My father tried to step forward again, but I didn't wait for the next threat. I didn't give him space to spit out more blame. I stepped past him. Their shouting echoed off the marble walls, but the sound felt distant, like someone yelling through a closed window. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. For the first time, I wasn't walking away as their child. I was walking away as someone free from them. Their voices kept rising behind me, desperate and cracked, but they no longer had a place in my life. The door at the end of the hallway opened to the outside light, and I kept moving toward it, leaving their noise and all the years of damage behind me. That night, the guys from the union dragged me out to an empty field just outside town. They lit a bonfire, set up a few folding chairs, and parked my truck so its headlights spread across the grass. It wasn't a big celebration, but it felt like exactly what I needed. The fire cracked, the night air was cool, and for the first time in a long while I felt steady. I didn't cry for my father, my mother, or Preston. I cried for the younger version of me. The kid who kept trying to prove he was worth something to people who never planned to see him clearly. That kid didn't exist anymore. I left him behind the moment I walked out of that courthouse hallway. Months passed, and life slowly settled into a rhythm that felt honest. I drove my truck everywhere, early mornings to work, late-night drives to clear my head, weekends helping friends move lumber or fix fences. The truck had dents now, a few scratches, and dust that never really washed off, but I liked it that way. Every mark had a memory. Every mile felt like a step away from the mess I grew up in. My parents were dealing with the consequences of the judgment. The fees, the penalties, the calls from the court, they were all theirs to handle. I didn't follow the details, and I didn't check up on them. The little information that reached me was enough to know the pressure was heavy. Preston's life didn't improve either. He made choices, and those choices caught up to him. I felt no satisfaction in that. It was simply the natural end of the path he insisted on following. Sometimes my phone buzzed with messages from my mother. Short, emotional lines about missing me or wanting to talk. I never opened them. Leaving them unread wasn't anger, it was self-preservation. I had finally learned I didn't owe my peace to anyone who tried to break it. Driving became my quiet space. With the windows down and the wind pushing through the cab, I felt something I had never known growing up: control. The truck wasn't just a machine anymore. It was proof of the life I built when I stopped chasing approval. It carried my tools, my plans, my freedom. I didn't need revenge that hurt them. I needed distance that healed me. Walking away had been the real victory. I had carved out a life that belonged only to me. And as I drove down open roads with the sun setting ahead, I knew one thing with absolute clarity: I wasn't going back. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away from them? Or should I have tried one more time? Tell me in the comments. I'd really love to know. And if you want more stories like mine, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.